Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Alvarez, and I'll be talking about the podcast named Talking About Race in School, an interview with José Vilson by Jennifer Gonzalez. It's a really good podcast. Some of the points is Darren Wilson versus Mike Brown case, the idea of a lens and perspective, and the idea of double consciousness. First, I want to run through the Darren Wilson versus Mike Brown case. Now, Darren Wilson is a police officer. He's on the top right corner. And Mike Brown, it was a student, bottom right corner. Now, here goes the story. Mike Brown had an encounter at a local store with the store owner. There was an altercation, and eventually the police were called. Darren Wilson eventually encounters Mike Brown, and Mike Brown was with a friend in the middle of the road, and Darren Wilson told him to get out of the road. Apparently, he did not want to move, so Darren Wilson told him again, move out of the road, and Brown fidgeted with the weapon, or there was like a movement, and Mike Brown was killed on scene by Officer Darren Wilson. This case ends by Darren Wilson never being indicted for the shooting of Mike Brown. And the podcast mentions this to give examples about how we can talk about race in school, and the current issues during the podcast in the present time, like race and protesting and Black Lives Matter and all that. And another key point is the lens and perspective. It discusses the idea that where you come from may affect your view on a certain situation. Your social background, your economic background, and your political backgrounds can definitely give you advantages or disadvantages in a situation. For example, if you go back to the Brown and Darren Wilson case, like people say, oh, if Brown had obeyed, he wouldn't have died. It would never have happened. There's so many lens and there's many perspectives of it. There's also another perspective where Mike Brown gave some type of currency to the store owner. And there was no 911 from the store. It was actually from somebody else, from the 911 call. Also, another perspective is the community. The community was already in a hostile scene. People had testimonies that they did not have any relationship between the police and the community. So could that raise tensions and lead to this situation that ended up in a life being taken? So the podcast really focuses on perspective and lens and, just double checking where you're coming from and how it affects your view. For example, double consciousness. Everybody may have a double conscious. It's the internal conflict that we have between us. In the podcast it mentions, as a teacher, we have a sense of responsibility to serve the students and community. However, sometimes we might be in a school or an environment, a work environment that may be totally different from who we are, culturally, socially, and economically. For example, white teacher in a school with people of color versus a teacher of color in a school with people of color. White teacher in a school with people of color may not have the same respect from the beginning as a teacher of color in a school with people of color. People tend to gravitate to their own people, to their own certain group, and there could be, when it's different, there could be a lack of distrust and a little bit like feeling back. Now, as a teacher, we gotta, remember this, and some ideas is we have to find the root of the problem and dissect it when we encounter students expressing themselves, or we have some current issues in our present time. We need to encourage students to use their voice, to take in information, analyze it, come up to a conclusion, and express it in a healthy manner. Give students the evidence and have them create their own conclusion, not us pushing our agenda or our ideology to the students. We can't be telling them our opinion and make them believe the same thing as us, because that's never going to happen. Everybody has different experiences and they might believe something different than we may believe in. So we need to be agents of change. We need to help them provide change for society for the better. And of course, we gotta do this in a healthy manner. And the podcast mentioned some ground rules: respect, listen, care, and validate feelings. You gotta respect each other between the student and the teacher. Gotta be able to listen to each other between the teacher and the student, or the student and the parent. Sometimes parents and their children have different views. You gotta be able to embrace that. You want to care about them. Of course, they're your students, so you got to care about what they need from you, what they may need from somebody else. And of course, we want to validate their feelings. We want to make sure that they feel validated, even if we might have different opinions or views. They should be feeling validated because they're human beings and they have their ideology, and we cannot change them. We can guide them and maybe try them help see another perspective of it, but we can't change their political or their ideology to be the same as ours. And like when we say, like, we can give our opinion, but of course emphasize that's my opinion on a certain situation or issue. Well, that was it. Thank you for watching. I really recommend hearing this podcast. It really allows you to open yourself to new ideas and perspectives. And you start thinking, how can I be a better teacher? How can I talk about issues like race and stuff like that with our students? I totally recommend it. Thank you.